Inexpensive, gluten-free pantry solutions coming your way next. Hey, I'm Hope from Under the Median, where every week on this channel we talk about practical frugality. Now, my husband Larry's usually here with me. He's behind the camera. Say hey, Larry.
Under the weather.
He is under the median, under the weather. He's not feeling super well, so I'm going to do this solo, guys. We've been talking a lot recently on the channel about stocking your emergency pantry and doing so in such a way that it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg, and you feel like you're consistently spending like 2/3 of what you make on trying to get your pantry stocked up. Well, I heard back from a lot of you, and I heard two really important things. One thing that some of you found really important was to have items which were organic. And the other thing I kept hearing over and over again was I have to spend a lot of money because I'm gluten-free, or someone that I love needs a gluten-free diet. Well, something that I don't know if we've even mentioned it ever on the channel. If we have, it's been very, very like once in a while, and maybe once or twice, that we've even mentioned the fact that Larry actually went gluten-free for a long period of time. He suffered from eczema, and so he went gluten-free and sugar-free, and that actually cleared up about 80% of the eczema. So I actually fed my family a gluten-free diet for a long period of time, and I did so without spending a lot of extra money. So some of the items I'm going to show you on the program today are actually items that I used when I was cooking gluten-free. And these are all items, by the way, from Pleasant Hill Grain Company. I'm going to show you some of the great samples that they sent me. Thanks, guys, from Pleasant Hill Grain. And then I'm going to talk about each of those products. I'm going to tell you why all of you, even if you are not gluten-free, I'm going to pull it over here. You need one of these, guys. You need a grain mill. And when somebody says grain mill, you immediately think, well, you use it to grind wheat. But let me tell you something, this baby can grind a whole lot more things than just wheat. So after I show you the products, I'm going to show you this and tell you why everybody needs to get one. And then I'm going to give you 10 different baseline tips. These will be super helpful for you if you're trying to do this without feeling like you have to make 2 meals every single night for your family, and that you're spending most of what you make trying to buy these gluten-free products. I'm going to give you 10 tips that I used all the time in order to feed my family when Larry was gluten-free. All right, we're going to get started in just a sec. I got one little housekeeping thing to do super fast before we swing into the topic for the program today. And that super sweet but super short thing is, I know a lot of you have been interested in the portable power stations that we've been talking about. We love our Opus portable power station, and we've done a couple of videos on it. We've mentioned it in several videos. We also have a special 15% off coupon they sent specifically for Under the Median viewers. Now, we've listed that coupon in a couple of videos, and we told you you need to go and grab the coupon and use it because it's for a short period of time. Opus sent me an email and they said, tell your viewers it's good till the end of the month. So that super sweet 15% off deal, that is available till the end of the month. I'm going to make sure that I list that coupon code in the description of this video so you can grab it and use it. Now, don't worry if you miss it. It's past the end of the month. They're still going to give all of the Under Median viewers 10% off of their purchases. So after the end of this month, after the end of June, I'll replace that coupon code in the video description with the one that is 10% off. But if you want to score that extra 5%, you're going to want to do that before the end of June. Whew! All right. That is out of the way. Housekeeping done. We're going to talk gluten-free products. Now, as I mentioned, Pleasant Hill Grain was kind enough to send me some 1-pound samples, for which I am very, very grateful. And when they contacted me, I said, here's what I want. I want gluten-free products, and most of these are completely gluten-free. And because this has been a concern with my viewers, I want to show them some of the products they can use that are gluten-free. Everything that you can order from Pleasant Hill Grain, they have so much more there, guys, than just like grains or gluten-free products. They have a huge, huge array of stuff. In fact, that's where I got my my grain mill. And this baby is about 20 years old, guys. That's why I talk about Pleasant Hill Grain all the time, because they're a great family-owned company. I bought that grain mill almost 20 years ago. I've used it hard. It has held up like a champ. So that's why I'm so excited about this company. There'll be links, by the way, to the products and also to Pleasant Hill Grain in the description of the video. All right. Organic steel cut oats. Now, this particular sample, not gluten-free, but you can get gluten-free oats. Why do I like steel cut oats? I've got some notes, guys, in case you see me looking down. I like steel cut oats because, first of all, they're kind of nutty, they're kind of chewy, they are incredibly versatile. Larry is a huge, like if we run a steel cut oats, he would be out buying more steel cut oats tomorrow because he loves them that much. But steel cut oats aren't just for breakfast. We have an amazing grain loaf that we make whenever we have some leftover rice and some steel cut oats. And then especially if we have a little millet left over, we're going to mix those 3 grains together and make a grain loaf. It's a recipe that our son, Daniel, who just graduated from high school, he created the recipe when he was about 14 or 15 years old. And it's so spot on, amazing. It is really, really good. He demonstrated it once on Chef AJ's program on YouTube. And it's a fantastic recipe. It's like a meatloaf, only of course it's a meatloaf because we don't eat meat. It's really, really an awesome recipe. So one of the things that I just want to mention right off the bat, when we get started and swinging into these things, I picked these deliberately. 1, because I've used all of them, and 2, because they're incredibly versatile. Whenever you're talking about eating gluten-free, and you're talking about doing it on a budget, you have to look for products that are going to go a long way, that you can use for breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks. You can do a lot of things with them. And that is part of the problem, other than the incredible cost of pre-made gluten-free products, is the fact that when you buy a pre-made gluten-free product, the only thing it's good for is like that one application. That's it. But when you buy base ingredients and cook from those base ingredients, then you've got a whole host of things that you can make. All right, next thing on the list is organic brown rice. All of these samples are organic too, by the way, guys. They come in like 40-pound bag, or not bags, 40-pound buckets. They come in the buckets that are specifically designed to be able to sit on your shelf for up to 10 years and still stay fresh. They've been triple cleaned. And they also have oxygen absorbers in there to make sure that there's no excess oxygen in there. Brown rice. I've mentioned rice a lot when we talk about prepping because it's it's a basic ingredient. This is brown rice. And I know so many of you said to my comment that I keep both brown white rice and white rice on my shelf because white rice lasts longer. It's more shelf stable than brown rice, which actually over the whole course of the discussion is true. But this brown rice comes in one of the big buckets, guys. So it'll last you a good long time if you want to grab that from Pleasant Hill Grain. I love brown rice because it does have a lot more nutritional value. It's chewier than white rice. And so I think it's probably more versatile, even though white rice, I have it on the shelf. All right, lentils. You guys know my love of lentils if you watch for any length of time. Lentils, yes, they're a bean. Any bean is going to be gluten-free. But this bean, if you've never used it, lentils, 15 to 20 minutes cooking time, that's it. The only caveat is that they grow really close to the ground and they're tiny, so they tend to get like clumps of dirt and stuff in them. You got to rinse them really, really well. Got to use a sieve, not a colander. They'll go through. The colander holes are too big. You'll wind up with lentils all over your counter or in your sink if you try to do it that way. So use a sieve, rinse them really well, 15 to 20 minutes, almost twice as much water as lentils. Lentils, my lentil burgers, tell me in the comments section, give me a shout out if you saw the video where I showed you how to make my lentil burger recipe. I'll make sure that there's a link to that video up above in the description of this video. It's probably one of my family's favorite recipes, and they ask for it over and over and over again. Here's one. Tell me if you're familiar with these things, by the way, too, as we go through them. Excuse me, I've been sick for a few days, and I'm still fighting a little bit of a cough. Buckwheat. Are you familiar with buckwheat, and have you used it? Buckwheat is actually, despite the fact it's buckwheat, it's not related to wheat at all, which is why it's gluten-free. It's a seed. And I'm going to turn it around because I think it'll probably be easier to see. No, maybe it won't. All right. So it is a triangular kind of pyramid-shaped seed. Now, raw whole buckwheat is going to be this nice light tan color, and it almost Almost some of it has a little bit of a greenish hue to it. That's how you know that you have just unprocessed raw buckwheat. This is kind of what you want, guys. The unprocessed raw buckwheat has a very mild flavor if it has been toasted. You might see it called toasted buckwheat. It's actually kasha. That's the name of it once it's toasted. Once it's toasted, it gets harder, but it also kind of gets a little bit bitter. And that's why some people, if they think they've tried buckwheat and they're like, oh, it's bitter, I don't like it. Well, it's because they tried kasha and not necessarily the raw buckwheat. Raw buckwheat also incredibly, incredibly versatile. Has a lot of starches in it, which kind of makes it mimic the starchiness of a grain like wheat. But it doesn't have any gluten in it at all. All right, I'm going to move along. I'm going to put my notes down there. We're moving along. We're at number 5, quinoa, which it's so funny to me because quinoa is, of course, everybody knows what quinoa is. It's so popular these days. It's a complete protein. It's a seed. And all of a sudden, I think somebody tell me, I think in the comments section, tell me, I think 10, 15 years ago, maybe, is the first time that it came really on the scene in the U.S. Now, those of you who live overseas, I know you're going to tell me it's probably been popular where you live for a really long time. Americans as a whole were unfamiliar with quinoa. And all of a sudden, like fancy restaurants started serving it. Everybody went, oh, we got to have this. And it just shot to huge, huge degrees of popularity. Here's the deal. Quinoa is going to be more expensive than rice, but it is a complete protein and it's more versatile than you think it is. Because I've used quinoa. As I mentioned, I've used all of these products. Quinoa can be ground and it can be ground into a flour. You can use quinoa flour. You can use quinoa to make a porridge for breakfast. You can use it to make kind of a rice substitute. You can also use it. I have used it in sweet potato quinoa burgers. Oh my heavens. So good. The only downside of quinoa is if you're going to use it in a burger, it's a little more tender than if you were using like a rice or maybe an oat mixture to hold your burger together. And it's going to tend to want to like fall apart a little bit more easily than some of the other burgers you make. But the taste is so worth being really careful when you bake it and when you put it on your bun or whatever, because it's so outstandingly good, good, good. Here's another one that a lot of people are not familiar with. This is Amaranth, and I have used this. And can you see that's a teeny tiny seed? Maybe if I turn it around. If I turn it around, is that easier? It is a teeny, teeny, tiny seed. Once again, everything that I've showed you is gluten-free. Amaranth, you can put it in a pan and you can pop it. The seeds will pop a little bit, and as you toast them, really, really interesting flavor when you toast them. You can also grind it. Now, are any of these a direct substitute for flour? Well, I got to be honest. You can make some flatbreads with some of these. You can make a tortilla out of the ground amaranth. You can also make a really, really good, really easy tortilla, not out of the green lentils that I showed you, but if you get red lentils, you can grind those and you can make an amazing red lentil tortilla, which I have done. It's literally ground red lentils and water, and you can make a tortilla. It's very flexible. So that's also very easy to do. That's what I really did when Larry was gluten-free. It was so time consuming to make bread for him. I did find a combination that worked pretty well to make like muffins for him. And it was like 1 part tapioca flour, 1 part, I think it was 1 part almond flour and 1 part rice flour. And that combination of 3 ingredients worked pretty well to make homemade like muffins for him. He ate a lot of flatbread because flatbread is actually pretty easy to make with items which are gluten-free. So that's one of the caveats. People feel like, well, I want to be able to eat gluten-free bread. Well, you know, sometimes you have to substitute a little bit unless you're willing to spend a lot of time in order to come up with a made from scratch gluten-free bread that you're going to consistently feel like you have the time to make. Here's one more thing I want to show you before we move on to the grain mill, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the grain mill, why you need one, even if you're gluten-free. This is millet. We love millet. It's got a great kind of nutty flavor, and you can use it instead of rice. A lot of these things I showed you, great substitute for rice in your meals instead of eating maybe, I don't know, something that would have gluten in it. Then you can substitute this in your meals. Millet, if you've never had millet, it's a real treat, and it's an interesting kind of a mixed treat in our family. Some people in our family love millet, and others are like, not so much. Okay, I'm going to move this out of the way, make a couple of more notes. All right. As I mentioned, all of the items from Pleasant Hill Grain are going to come in a bucket. You can order them in bulk. They're about 40-pound buckets. The lid is going to have a rubber grommet in it. This is a really old kind of dirty lid that I had in the back, but I grabbed it to show you. See that rubber grommet in there? That's important when you're looking for items for long-term storage purposes. You're going to get one of these lids, and if it's got that rubber grommet in it, that's really, really going to help seal it very, very well. Because you want to, with any long-term storage solutions, you want to make sure that you're guarding against humidity, you're guarding against moisture, you're guarding against bugs, and you're guarding against air, right? Because oxygen will deteriorate products. And these lids are really, really going to help with that on those 5-gallon buckets. Now, the other thing you're going to want, trust me when I tell you, this is a bucket opener. Those lids, I mean, if you really want to try to get a lid off without a bucket opener, you can. But seriously, these are like, I don't know, $10 or $15 at the most to get a bucket opener. This is like, my sister gave this to me. Now you know why she's like my favorite person in the whole world. Because without it, it was nearly impossible to get that lid off that bucket. And I was like, holy cow, so much easier with one of these. I'll make sure there's a link in the description of the video. We talked about my grain mill. I'm going to show it to you real quick. There are 3 kinds of grain mills. There's a stone grain, I'm going to say it again. Stone grain mill, all right? That's going to be stone ground. You've seen stone ground corn or stone ground wheat. They're ground with stones, kind of like a miniature at-home version of the great big grist mills, right? The nice thing about stone grinders is the fact that they don't wear out. Stone really doesn't wear out. They'll last you a really, really, really long time. They tend to be a little bit larger than these, and they tend to be a little kind of expensive on the front end to get a stone ground mill. This is a burr mill. I'm going to explain that to you in a second, but the third kind of mill that I also don't have is an impact mill. Whisper mill is a good like name brand example of an impact mill. Basically, you're going to put your grain in there and it's going to spin it super, super fast. They're going to smash into each other and they're going to explode into a million pieces. And they work very well. Whisper mill is actually known for being like lower decibel than this, although this is a mid decibel machine and I've never found it problematic as far as the amount of noise it makes. A whisper mill works really well, but the problem is that purists will tell you that when the grain is heated past a certain temperature, you can begin to lose some nutrient value, which for a lot of people is why they're choosing a whole grain product in the first place, is because they want all of the nutritional value, which generally because of heat and processing is stripped out of it when you buy it pre-made from the grocery store. So I think their point is if you're heating it past a certain level, the possibility exists that you're destroying more of the nutrients than you want to in the first place. So I went with a burr mill. This is a 4-cup capacity. And for those of you who asked, I did have some people who said, yeah, but you're going to need the hand crank. I have it. When I bought mine 20 years ago, I bought a package deal, which you can still get, by the way, from Pleasant Hill. You can get the base, and then you can also get the attachment to go with it. There's a lot of other attachments. There's like some food processor type attachments that will go with this grain mill, allow you to process meats and things like that, cheeses, grind cheeses. I don't have any of those, of course. I don't eat meat or cheese, but for me, this was absolutely perfect. I'm going to real quickly, now this will allow you to, now I can't get it. There we go. You can take it apart and clean it. I haven't taken it apart and cleaned it. You're going to see a lot of dust in there because, there we go. I just ground some things with it and I haven't cleaned it since then. I wanted to show you. These are the burrs. So you can see that you've got these milled pieces here that fit inside of one another. And they have really, really close tolerances. So the grain is forced through there. And this, you see this spiral? Any of you old enough to remember when your mom or your grandma used to take leftover roast beef and put it through one of those hand grinders, right, to grind it? It's kind of like the same principle. It's going to pull that grain down there and through these burrs, which are close tolerance, and then that is going to break it into much smaller pieces. On here, let's see if I have, there we go. You can see like you can go from you can just crack it here, and then the smaller these circles get, then the smaller the pieces of grain are that come out at the end. Now, why am I showing you this if you're gluten-free and you're like, no, I can't use it. I'm not going to grind. I'm not going to grind grain. I've used this personally to grind a whole lot more than just grain. When Larry was gluten-free, in order to save money, rather than buy rice flour, I would buy rice and I would grind the rice in here. Now, one of the only things I've tried to put through that did not work super, super well was tapioca. It did not work well. Just don't do it. Trust me, it did not work well. Something about the texture of the tapioca kind of gummed up the whole works in here. And I was like, nope, that's not going to work. So what I did was, the other tip I have for you, if you want to grind, now anything that has a lot of moisture in it is not going to be able to go through here. So if you've got, it's going to do some herbs, some nuts, some seeds, but if it's got a lot of oil in it or it's got a little moisture in it, it's probably not worth trying to put through here, especially if you do it in small amounts. We have 2 of these coffee mills, and one of them is, of course, used daily for coffee because Larry needs his coffee.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for those of you who suggested Pete's coffee, by the way. Oh my God. It is so good.
Oh my God.
We're so in love with this coffee. We're so going to buy it again. But I have a second one of these, which we reserve specifically for herbs and spices and seeds and like flax. If I'm going to grind flax for anything, it's going to go in here. And so this, I was able to use this to grind the tapioca into tapioca flour just fine. So if you can't put it through here, then make sure you have one of these babies sitting around, and then you can put it through there. I mean, the only problem is, you can only do small amounts at a time, whether with this, you're putting through 4-cup increments or up to 4-cup increments. Here are some ideas of what you can mill in here other than wheat. Rice, the buckwheat, millet, corn, that's field corn, or you can even do dried sweet corn, split peas, quinoa. I have ground lentils in there. There are some bread recipes that are gluten-free bread recipes, like the Ezekiel bread. Yes, I made Ezekiel bread from scratch one time. It was a lot of work because there are several different things that go into Ezekiel bread. Tell me in the comment section, 1, if you know what Ezekiel bread is, and 2, if you've ever tried to make it from scratch. I may try it again sometime if I find a recipe that's easier than the one I tried years ago. But that's one of the reasons why one might want to be grinding some lentils, is if you're making Ezekiel bread. Flax, you can do flax in here, but to be honest, you're not doing it in huge quantities. I would just throw it in your extra coffee mill. Sesame seeds, same thing. Go ahead and put them in there. Coffee, of course, you can put in here. And then you can do some herbs and spices in here. But honestly, once again, go ahead and do it in your extra coffee mill that you've set aside for those purposes. Now, I promised you, if you hung in there with me, I was going to give you some tips, some ways that I really saved money while still feeding my family primarily a gluten-free diet. The first thing that you want to do, you want to make a list. Have a chart. Yes, it's one of my famous charts. You're going to want to have a chart that shows the name of each person in your family. And if more than one person has like some medical constraints, that's where it gets kind of like more difficult as you go along to figure out what everybody can eat. But go ahead and list those. Okay, this person can't have eggs. This person can't have nuts. This person in the family can't have cinnamon. We had a child. Have you ever heard of that? We had a couple of our kids that they were allergic to cinnamon. I know. So if there are any allergies, that kind of thing, you want to make sure you have that on the list first. Then you're literally going to list ingredients. It's going to be a chart. All the ingredients along one side, all the people in your family across the top, and then you're going to put check marks in each column as to what ingredients each person in the family can have. This is like playing bingo. Are you with me? Because when you find those ingredients that there are check marks all the way across, you're like, bingo. Those are the ingredients that everybody in the family can equally enjoy. Those ingredients, those are the ones that you are going to base your weekly menus off of. The next tip that I would have for you is if you have kids. You get kids and they don't want to, even if they can eat something, they may not enjoy it. We always had our no thank you list. We've mentioned it before, but I think it's worth mentioning again. We've raised 4 boys and they all eat. They're a very well-rounded diet, but part of the reason they do is even when they were younger, we said you get 3 no thank you foods. You don't get to scream and pitch a fit when somebody passes you peas if you hate them. But you can say no thank you and pass the peas to the next person. You get 3 foods on your no thank you list. You want to put a 4th no thank you on there, you got to choose which of the 3 that are on there that are least odious to you and get rid of one of them. But that was super helpful, I will say, in feeding a family and not feeling like there were so many things that I could not cook. Buy basic ingredients that are versatile. I referred to that a little bit earlier in the video. You're going to want to find the ingredients that aren't going to cost you a lot of money. Stock up on those ingredients when you find them on sale. Make those ingredients the core of all of your recipes, the core of all of your weekly menu plans. When you do that, first of all, you're going to find that there's a lot more that you can do. Tell me in the comments section, were you surprised at some of the ways that I was able to use some of the ingredients that I showed you? Nearly all the ingredients I showed you, I've used in multitude of ways. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, almost all of them. There are so many ways that you can use basic ingredients that you don't think of until you have to think of it. And then you do think of it. So make sure that you're choosing ingredients that are versatile. And keep a current list of everything that's in your pantry. We've talked about that too. You need help doing that. Listen, if you're stocking or restocking your pantry, I've got a free pantry stock up workbook. If you don't have it yet, there's going to be a link to request it. It'll be in the description of the video. The next thing you want to do is make a list of go-to recipes. Remember that chart you made looking for the bingos of all the ingredients that everybody liked and everybody could eat? You're going to make a go-to list of recipes. You're just going to have a list of recipes that you know you can make and everybody is going to eat, everybody is going to enjoy. Because the name of the game is to feel like you don't have to make 2 meals every night and you don't have to spend 2/3 of your grocery budget trying to buy gluten-free foods for the 1 or 2 people in the family that can't eat gluten. I'm not saying it's not important to take care of their needs. It absolutely is. But I think that there's a way you can do it without spending the vast majority of your time and your money purchasing those specialty foods that they market as gluten-free. Make sure that you're simplifying your meals. You don't have to serve 4 or 5 courses at every meal. You can serve a main dish. One of the great ways to do it is to have something like a taco bar, a baked potato bar, a salad bar, an appetizer bar, something where, yeah, you might make a couple of items that the person who's gluten-free in the family can't eat, but then there's going to be 5 or 6 things on the table that they can eat. So that's going to be fine as well. Avoid those pre-made gluten-free foods. They are so expensive. And believe me, I empathize with you because I had to do it for a few years until Larry's eczema was under control. So I understand exactly how it feels. Find places to buy those gluten-free foods. If you feel like you need some of those gluten-free like noodles and things like that, Aldi actually has a line of fairly reasonably priced gluten-free foods. And I have also found gluten-free rather reasonably priced at Big Lots. So there are ways of getting those items when you feel like you do need them or you just want to indulge in them, and that's okay too. Once again, don't cook 2 meals every single night. If you feel like you want to do that once a week, that's great, that's fine. but be really careful with getting into that habit of feeling like you're going to burn yourself out cooking 2 meals every single night. And don't forget, I've got some extra help for you. I've got that free pantry stock up workbook. There's a link to it in the description of the video. Now let's talk about non-food items for a second. If you want our list of 60 non-food things that you should be stocking up right now for your emergency pantry, there's a link to that video and it's right over there. You're going to want to watch that next.